I don't think if I were to go back, I would make a different decision, but there's a lot of heartache around feeling forced into making the decision, feeling that it wasn't particularly safe to stay here. For my children, the contentious two-party fight, brawl almost that it feels like we're in, it takes a high emotional toll on me. Maybe I'm just a sensitive person, but I think other people are feeling it too. I don't regret it, but I miss so much about being in my community. And I don't think that's going to go away. It can be both things. I can be happy that we made this decision. I wouldn't make a different decision, but I am still like mourning the life that I left.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is Chief Operating Officer and co-owner of Deerstone Consulting, Tashina Maasak Duttle. Deerstone is a company focused on improving the infrastructure of Alaska's rural and tribal communities by managing projects that upgrade energy systems, improve water and sanitation facilities, and expand broadband access. Tashina earned her bachelor's degree in Sustainable Resources Management from UAF and her master's in Project Management from UAA. During COVID, she started her own company, which eventually merged with two of her friends' companies to become Deerstone. In May of this year, she moved her family, including her husband and 3 kids, to northern Spain. This episode is part of a series on the decision to leave America permanently and how various folks did it. Tashina Maasak Duttle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Where did you grow up?
I was born on the Kenai Peninsula, grew up in Nikiski, was born in the 80s. My parents had moved to the community in sort of the oil boom days. When I was growing up out there, it was like there was really a decline in a lot of the oil and gas work that had been really prominent in the decades prior.
How old are you now?
40. Almost 41.
Oh, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
What did your parents do in Nikiski?
My mom worked on the North Slope for a long time as a secretary and then transferred to the secretary sort of oil and gas company role, support services industry in Kenai. And my dad and her met at their workplace in like 82 or something like that. He was in construction and did a lot of project work in the community on the platform on the slope.
And is your mom a Nupiaq?
She is, yeah.
Yeah. And so do you have a relationship with that part of your life?
A little bit. My mom was the oldest of 7 kids. Both of her parents are back from the North Slope. She grew up in Fairbanks, and she had kind of a traumatic childhood with abuse in the family, moved out of state at like 15 years old, and then came back in her early 20s. So she left for a while, came back, and had like a bit of a disconnection from her tribal community and even her immediate family. So I grew up with them. You know, they lived in Fairbanks, would see them every so often, but we didn't have a strong relationship when I was growing up.
My stereotype of Nikiski is that it's like a super conservative community. To me, it's sort of like the Valley of Kenai. I don't know if that's incorrect or not.
I feel like Nikiski does get a bad rap. I've heard the North Road is like known as being kind of a rough place. My experience growing up there, it's interesting. We owned maybe like 20 plus acres of property. He kept building rentals. God, I think we had like 10 or more rentals on our property. And he would just find these sort of like wayward young men that were like laborers, and he would let them live on our land in one of these rentals, and he would put them to work. And so people would talk about our property as the compound, the Sullins compound is what they would call it. So I grew up around all these kind of like roughneck, you know, some had been like in trouble with the law, couldn't get maybe like air quote real jobs. And it was a really interesting experience. He was kind of the leader of this group of men, and they would do odd jobs. They would do construction. He would, put them to work.
Was your dad doing it like as like a good Samaritan, like to help people who needed the help?
He was just very like charismatic and kind of like a leader in that like redneck community. And he could do anything. Like he was a welder. He would build cars. He would build houses. He was an entrepreneur. He never really had a W-2 job growing up. He just did a lot of different things, putting guys to work and that kind of thing.
Random men.
Interesting characters, we'll say.
And did you graduate from Nikiski High School?
Sort of struggled in my teen years with my parents. I was briefly in foster care as a teen youth. And I moved out of my parents' house at about 15, and I got emancipated when I turned 16. And then I moved to Seattle, and I lived there for 3 years.
When you were 16?
When I was 16, as an emancipated minor, had my own apartment, went to community college on Capitol Hill in Seattle, and did that for a few years until I came back when I was about 19.
That's just like so mind-blowing to me. Like, how did you do that? How at 16 did you like find an apartment? And
I was a super type A, like top of my class, very focused on school, but I had this like chaotic home life, that I just really wanted something different, but also was concerned about getting sucked into like the wrong crowd or like making the wrong choices, because I really felt like it was a dead end for me. So I was very motivated to, one, I didn't want to be in foster care. I didn't want to be dependent on other people after growing up in this chaotic environment. And so I had the grit and the determination to just be an early adult.
did you have a bad experience in foster care?
No, but it was very brief. It was an emergency situation. And then I ended up living with just a friend from high school for about a year until I was able to get emancipated and move out of state. So it was very temporary. And then I had, sort of a longer term solution until I was able to.
So moved to Seattle at 16, had your own apartment, did community college there for 3 years, and then what happened?
And then not having access to affordable health care in Seattle, I decided, you know what, I'm going to move back to Alaska. It's just going to be temporary. I'm Alaska Native, so I have access to Indian health services here.
Question about that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not able to have access to Indian health care outside of Alaska?
There are places that have services, but it was pretty hard to access in Seattle for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically moving back to Alaska for home health care.
Yes.
Where did you land and what did you do?
Temporarily moved to Nikiski, I want to say for like a month or two. And then, of course, like I need to get to a place where I have economic opportunities. I moved to Anchorage, got an apartment with my boyfriend. We had been dating when I lived in Seattle. He was also from Nikiski. Just happened chance that I met him when I was home visiting one year when I was living in Seattle. And he worked on the slope, and we lived here in Anchorage in a little apartment on Jewel Lake. I worked at like Claudia Brothers as a barista. I was a server for a number of years. I worked at Moose's Tooth for a while, some great institutions. And then the summers we would go and live in Cooper Landing, actually. Beautiful, loved it. It was like summer camp for grown-ups. And worked at a few different places in town for a couple of years, and just really enjoyed that sort of like wintering in Anchorage, summering in Cooper Landing. And then him and I got married at, I think I was 22, very young. We got together when I was 17, so I think it was like 5 years when we got married. And then had my son like 2 years later. And so 24 with a young child, and he was working on the slope. He was actually laid off when he was on his paternity leave for the birth of our son. And I had an, oh my God, moment where like, we can't rely on this like unpredictable oil and gas construction routine. We have a new child. So I decided when my son was just a few months old that I was going to go back to college in the fall. So he was born in March. My husband was laid off almost immediately, and I enrolled in school and was enrolled at UAA in the fall.
And what did you get a degree in?
Well, I started as a student in engineering and very, very quickly realized that I'm more of like a macro, like big picture thinker. So I actually moved to Fairbanks to work at the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, which was an amazing experience. And I went to UAF, and I graduated with my bachelor's of science from UAF with a degree in sustainable resources management, which was largely focused on supporting tribal communities. So it was like a mixture of kind of their rural development program and sort of like some anthropology. And it was like a build your own degree almost with this foundation of science and engineering.
And so did you move up there with your husband and child?
I did. My husband, my mother-in-law, my girlfriend, and my 2-year-old.
So y'all moved like as a big unit.
We did. And my husband ended up switching into their process technology program up there after having worked on the slope. And then my girlfriend graduated with her mechanical engineering degree up there. And when we finished our bachelor's in like 2014 or something like that, we moved back to Anchorage after graduating from UAF because it was very cold in Fairbanks in the winter, harder to find jobs up there. There's more opportunity in Anchorage. And so we moved back down to Anchorage, and I started working at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium in their rural energy program. And I was pursuing my master's degree in project management, which was wonderful. And that really, between the experience working with rural and tribal communities at CCHRC in Fairbanks and the sustainability kind of focused degree program, I also got my sustainable energy occupational endorsement. I really started to more like focus on this energy infrastructure project development in tribal communities.
So we talk about this a lot in the legislature about the cost of energy in remote communities where diesel has to be flown in if there's no other source of energy, and how that's really the most expensive electricity in America. I assume that's the problem that you're trying to tackle in your role.
Yeah. At ENTHC was largely focused on water, sanitation, health facilities, and reducing the cost of energy to reduce the cost of services, like those essential services.
And something I'll point out, and I've pointed out on the podcast before, but again, power cost equalization doesn't apply to schools or healthcare facilities, correct? It's only for individual residences. And so in a remote community, 40% of the school budget could be on heating the school or turning the lights on.
Yeah.
That's something that I don't think that the average Alaskan on the street appreciates. That when we talk about the education budget for remote Alaska, we're talking about energy.
Yeah. I mean, it touches everything. And it's a substantial cost and kind of a volatile one, depending on the cost. And
the year.
Yep, the year. And then if you have to fly it in because you can't barge it in because you ran out, it's going to be more expensive. Yeah.
And then what happened?
So I worked there for like 5 years. Then I had a very short stint where I left ENTHC to go work at at ANSEP, the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program at UAA.
Which I think they removed the AN part from their name.
I think it's just ANSEP now. Like it's not an acronym.
It's not an acronym.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's how
they're
got
getting around
it.
the DEI.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I started in February of 2020, and then in March, COVID happened and everything shut down, and all of our programs were on pause, and I was laid off a couple of months later. And in this time where my husband's a stay-at-home dad, and we had a mortgage in Anchorage. And
They still just had the one son?
No, in the middle of everything else going on, when I was working at ANTHC, we fostered for a number of years. We adopted one daughter from foster care and had another biological child, in like 2018. So by 2020, we had 3 kids. And we still had one foster kid that lived with us that was an adult at that time.
Oh.
And so 4 kids at home, 3 adults.
Can I ask just about your experience being a foster parent? I know that you had said that your experience as a foster child was very brief.
It was.
And I'm just assuming that your experiences as having been a foster child might have informed your decision to be a foster parent.
It did. And there is also this sense of responsibility being Indigenous, that 50+% of the children in foster care are Alaska Native. And to me, that meant that they were our children. And I wanted to be a part of the solution, the ability to take in Alaska Native and Indigenous foster kids, to make sure that they, one, had access to their family, and we could facilitate that, and cultural connections and just an understanding. Even though I grew up largely outside of my culture, when I started going back to college, I really started to connect with this sort of Indigenous identity that had really been missing in my youth. And I did feel a sense of responsibility to give back in that way. And I really wanted to expand my family through adoption, since almost half the exits of foster care are through adoption or long-term guardianship. And so I just knew there was this huge need to ensure cultural continuity in some way, ideally placing Native children in Native families, if not with family or tribal members.
And your mom is from Nuiqsut?
She
grew up in Fairbanks?
She grew up in Fairbanks, but the tribal ties are to the native village of Nuiqsut.
Got it. And do you have any relationship with Nuiqsut now?
I don't. No, I have shares in the village corporation and the regional corporation, but no real direct ties to the community.
Gotcha. So, adult foster kid in the house, 3 kids of your own, minors.
2020, COVID, everything's shut down. I mean, we think it's going to last through spring break, right? And
Everybody did. Everybody thought spring break was like an extra week long.
Yeah, and then it turned into like, oh, now we're homeschooling all the kids. Oh, now I lost my job. And it was a really challenging time. But I was able to call some friends. We're just that were doing contracting work in the same space that I had been working in when I was at ANTHC, sort of like rural energy, tribal engagement around energy projects. Brian Hirsch, who was the sole proprietor of Deerstone Consulting, was a friend of mine that I had known through our, shared work in that space. And Devony Plentovich, who had worked at the Alaska Energy Authority, had also created her own sole proprietor LLC. And they were working together on sort of energy project development and execution in rural tribal communities across the state. And I just called them and I said, hey, I just lost my job. Nobody's hiring. Everybody's freaked out about COVID. Like, do you guys know anybody that's hiring? And they're like, oh my gosh, we have so much work right now. Why don't you just start your own business and then we can kind of subcontract work to you. So I was literally like laid off on a Friday. By Friday night, I had gone online and set up my own business. By Saturday, I wrote a $1 million grant for the Native Village of Klutika for a multi-purpose building that was eventually funded. So day one, $1 million grant.
Wow.
And the rest is history. That was like 5.5 years ago. We've now consolidated all under Deerstone as, 1/3 owners. We have like 15 employees. We're doing a ton of work across the state.
So the three of you are the owners.
That's correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. So this was like the early part was we all had our own businesses.
Gotcha.
And now we've consolidated. We have a bunch of employees and we've developed a great team under all of the iGEM, BIL funding. We're able to bring in, I lost track, but it's quickly approaching $1 billion in successful grant applications that are majority serving rural tribal communities across the state and largely in broadband and energy projects.
That's really impressive. And I guess to get to the point of why you're on the show today, your family moved to Spain.
We did. We moved to Spain in May of this year, about the time that the kids got out of school. But it wasn't a knee-jerk decision.
And they were still in school in Anchorage?
Mm-hmm. They were going to Polaris when we left Polaris.
Okay. Yeah, Polaris near a house.
Yeah. Love the school.
Yeah.
The staff, they were amazing. That was one of the harder things to leave, actually, was the school. Obviously, our community and friends and relationships also was very, very hard decision to make. But we traveled 2 consecutive years before that. First to kind of Portugal and northern Spain, and then a deeper dive into northern Spain the second year, which was in 2024. And then it's, after the election and actually this change in administration in January, we made the final decision to move. We had planned on doing it a couple of years from now when my son graduated high school. But with all of the changes,
So it was a political decision.
Yeah. I mean, we were thinking about it under different administrations for tons of reasons, like just the education system right now at NASD was really challenging for us. We just keep seeing like the erosion of services, whether it's they got rid of the librarian, they're like sharing the nurses now, they eliminated a lot of their special ed services. And the day that we made the decision was actually after we met with Tia at Polaris, which was their principal. And we said, we understand what's going on. Like, I understand what's kind of happened, the effects in my world and sort of the grant-funded energy space with the new administration. I said, tell me what's going on in the education side, because I know it's, what's happening right now. And she said, well, it's not good. We've got to make some tough decisions. We've got to eliminate more positions. And, the long and the short of it was that my son would not be able to graduate high school without taking supplementary classes outside of Polaris. And I just imagine that getting worse and worse and worse as my kids got older. So education was like a really big part for us. But also, I remember when my 4-year-old came home terrified because they played a scary, werewolf is going room to room to room and we have to hide in the closets and turn off all the lights. And I realized she was 4 years old and doing an active shooter drill. And that's definitely a big...
And that's an America problem, not an Anchorage problem.
That's true.
Yeah. So, and you guys had been to Spain a couple of times. You'd kind of had this on the back burner. And so basically these...
conditions.
The new president, the state of education funding in Alaska, particularly at that time, because it was, we didn't know that we were going to be able to increase education funding. You guys decided that this was the time.
Yep, that's exactly right. And we had done all the research and understood which visa we would apply for under the digital nomad visa. And
okay, you got to teach us about that. What's a digital nomad visa? And is Spain in particular an easier place for Americans to move to? Or do you have an opinion about that?
We did sort of a desktop study to try to narrow down our criteria before we traveled to Portugal and Spain. So Portugal, we had heard, was really low barriers to entry. They had a digital nomad visa, which means that you can go and live there. You work remotely, or the visa holder, which would be like the head of the household, works remotely. and gets all of their income from outside of the country. And Portugal and Spain both met those criteria. And with my ownership in Deerstone, I was able to transition basically to remote work.
And no one cared? Like your partners were fine with it?
Mostly, yeah. I think there is some hesitation and like, well, how is this going to work? What about the time change? Are you really able to stay connected? And my hope moving forward, this is my first time back, but my hope is that I can come back to Alaska every 3 to 4 months and engage with our staff and make connections with our clients and do any remote travel. And yeah, so we're still figuring out the rhythms, but so far it has been successful. I do feel disconnected, sort of like from our team in a way, because I'm not in the office every day.
So digital nomad visa, and you're the head of the household. Are there any restrictions on how big your household can be?
I don't think so, or at least we didn't exceed it. So it's me and my husband and my 3 children on my visa. And I applied as like the visa holder that, I'll work remotely. You have to meet certain income requirements. They prefer these sort of like contractor versus like W-2 employees is what I've heard. I didn't try to apply as a W-2 employee, so I'm not sure if that's more challenging or not. But that's what we were hearing. We worked with an immigration consultant. And so it was a matter of, you got to get all the documents together, legal documents, apostilles, which is like a verification that your documents are real, either from the state or at the federal level. And so we started doing that in January. Our timeline was really accelerated. We decided in the first week of the new administration, so end of January, and we are out of here by May 17th.
Did y'all speak Spanish?
No, very little. My husband is actually, he's half Mexican, and he grew up for the first handful of his years in New Mexico with grandparents whose first language was Spanish. So there's like somewhere in there.
Some familiarity.
Yeah, there's some, but it also sounds very different. Yes, Spain and northern Spanish is very different from the kind of Spanish that his grandparents spoke. So, but we're getting it slowly. Our kids are enrolled in like a half Spanish, half English program. So I think they'll pick it up quickly. We're still living in Airbnbs today, We've been in like 5 Airbnbs in the last 5 months.
Oh.
And so our hope is once we're settled in the house, we bought a house, we get to move in about 10 days or so, when I go back to Spain next week. Then we will start taking classes. And there are some good immersion sort of like programs, language programs, or potentially, since there's 3 adults that are trying to learn, we may just hire a tutor to help to support us because it's cost effective.
The cost of living compared to Alaska?
Well, that was a big determining factor. So when Trump took office, a lot of the projects that our team works on were targeted. They were targeted as like DEI. They're huge grant programs that fund renewable energy and broadband access for tribal communities. So a lot of our projects were put on pause, and there was a lot of uncertainty on whether or not those funds were going to be clawed back or projects were going to move forward. And I was looking at sort of my cost of living with my family here versus what it could potentially be in Spain. And my analysis was there's an upfront cost to relocating, obviously, but then long term, it would be much more affordable for our family to live in Spain, given the uncertainty of sort of my work.
And although you've been in like 5 different Airbnbs, you mentioned to me before we started that the amount that you're making off renting off your house here is not only paying the mortgage on that house, but the difference is paying for your Airbnb in Spain.
Yeah, we happened to buy at the right time, like fall of 2019, where rates were really low, and
housing we thought was expensive, but was so low.
Yeah, it was. And then there's a lot of sweat equity. We've worked on the house over the last 5 or 6 years and, made it beautiful. And then, of course, handed the keys over to tenants. So they're enjoying it now. But the difference between what they pay and our mortgage is enough to cover our housing costs in Spain, which is phenomenal.
You're sending your kids to private school.
That's correct.
Was it partly the language issue?
Yeah, at least for this first year, we're concerned that it would be a pretty heavy lift if we put them into a fully Spanish school.
Because how old are your kids?
They're 7, 9, and 16.
Yeah, especially the 16-year-old,
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, and so we've talked about moving the younger kids, my 2 daughters, to public school after the first year, because I imagine they'll be fairly fluent after a year, immersed in the language, and then keeping my son in private school because he's so close to graduation.
Back in January, when you guys decided, hey, we're going to move, what did the kids say?
Well, because we had been talking about it for at least a couple of years, it wasn't new information. We had pretty open conversations with our kids and tried to use a little bit of democratic voting. It's like we let them all have a say, talk to them about how they would feel about it. The girls, I think, were excited mostly because there's a beach there. Like, I don't think they, fully understood what it would mean to actually leave everything and move. My son, though, I gave him full veto power because he was in high school. I'm like, we can stick it out for another couple of years. If you want to stay here, we will stay here, and then we'll move when you graduate from high school. But he made the decision, like he was the final vote that helped to sway whether we stayed or we went, and he voted to leave. I mean, I just think that that's like pretty phenomenal as a 16-year-old kid in high school with connections to friends. And it's so important at that developmental age because he understood what was sort of happening in the political environment and the impacts potentially to their education if we were able to go to Spain and the opportunities that could open for them in the future.
And I know you're pretty new to Spain because you moved there in May, and this is your first trip back to Alaska
Correct,
since moving. But this early on, do you think you made the right decision?
Yes, but it's coming back has been really challenging. I didn't expect the flood of emotions. I'm very type A. Once I decide on something, it becomes a challenge that I'm gonna see it through. And I'm a project manager at heart. It's like, okay, I've got to do these 20 things, and then I get to the end goal, right? So I was just in like blinders on, get all the steps done, get there. And I was feeling really good about it before I left. I was like, life is very different. I'm not driving, I'm walking all the time. The weather's great, the food is wonderful. But as soon as I came back a couple days into my trip here, I was like, wow, I have such a community here. I missed my friends, I had a moment where I just kind of broke down and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Did I make the right choice? My mom is here. She's elderly and moved from Nikiski to Anchorage when my dad passed away a couple of years ago and bought a house 6 houses down from mine.
Thinking that she'd be here.
Yeah, exactly. And so she's feeling pretty lonely and I've been staying with her since I've been here. And then I just have all the friends that have become family over the years and nieces and nephews and the tribal communities that I've built these relationships and all of the people that has touched. I realize how much I miss that after being back here. It's like the blinders came down and the reality and the weight of our decision really like hit me. And then, of course, everybody that I work with, we have this amazing staff and this business that we've built. I do miss being there in person to work with our team and to just feel like I'm a part of this group. It's so different being on Zoom, and we do Zoom meetings, but it's different when you can get everybody together for happy hour. Like we had a little get together at Brian, my business partner's house last night, and kids were running around, and it's just different. And I do now see that there's like this big hole. I'm like, how do I honor that feeling while also still standing firm in this decision that we've made? And my hope is that I can just come back often and continue to nurture those relationships, even if I'm living halfway around the world.
The rest of your family, they haven't been back.
They have not.
So they're just chugging along. Has anyone been homesick?
The kids have definitely, I think, experienced bouts of homesickness. My son in particular, those high school years and those friends that he's developed over his course at Polaris, they were really hard for him to leave. He really wanted to come back with me. And I said, okay, well, what's that going to look like? All your friends are in school, and you're in school, so you're going to take time off of school. So I think it kind of comes and goes. Like, I think they're excited because it's a new place. There's new challenges and new opportunities. It's felt a lot like vacation because we left at the beginning of summer. We were there all summer. They just started school about a month ago, in the second week of September. They're only like a month into school. And now it's like the reality of we're in a different school, trying to speak a different language, learn in a different language. And it's like, I think a little overwhelming this last month for them.
Have y'all made any friends?
Yeah, a couple. I've made one friend randomly that's a business owner on the same block that we bought our house. She's wonderful. She owns like a little boutique clothing store where she goes to fashion shows all around Europe, and she brings small batch items from different designers and has a cute little shop. And her daughter just left to go to Canada at 15 for a foreign exchange. So we have like this similar situation, very different. And then I met a gal who's lived the last year in Texas with her husband, who's a U.S. citizen. They have a daughter who's 19, but she's originally from Colombia. And they moved there within a few weeks of the same time we did.
So they're new as well.
And we're living on
And
the
English
same block.
speakers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're English speakers. And so it's funny because she, you know, I'm like 40 and she's like 65. And she's just got like real Tia, you know, auntie energy.
Yeah.
And she's just really gregarious. But those are the only two people that I really know at this point. And I hope that that community continues to grow. There's some expat groups that meet periodically that I haven't had an opportunity to meet up with. But I'm imagining as I get into some rhythms this fall, once we get settled into a house, I can start to make more of an effort like in those social spaces.
What city are you in?
It's Oviedo, Spain. It's just south of the northern coast, maybe like 30 minutes from the coast.
Not far from Portugal.
Few hour drive.
What's the biggest like Spanish city that we would have heard of?
Gosh, I don't even.
What airport do you use?
It's the Oviedo airport. Yeah, I mean, I think there's maybe like 200,000 or 300,000 people.
Oh,
in
okay,
the
so it's a
city.
pretty big
It's
city.
not huge.
It's like Anchorage.
But it's condensed. It's like doesn't have as much of a sprawl as Anchorage. You know, it's like it's
Higher density housing.
exactly. Yeah,
More walkable.
very walkable. Yeah.
Gotcha. Are you working Alaskan hours?
A little bit. So I try in the summer, it was kind of like I was still in Alaska time. So it was crazy. I was up until 4 or 5 in the morning and then would sleep until noon. While the kids weren't in school, that sort of worked. We didn't need to be on a schedule. But as soon as they started school, I was like, okay, I got to get on a real schedule. Or like I see my kids after they come home from school and then maybe I have a few hours of meetings when they're getting ready for bed. So like maybe start my meetings at like 9 p.m. a few days a week. I'm still kind of figuring out what that looks like with their new school schedule. And like I said, it was only maybe 10 days after they started school that I came to Alaska. So now when I go back, it's like, you know, just trying to fine tune that.
My guess is that like a lot of business takes place on email,
Yeah.
which can happen at any time.
Asynchronous. Yeah. I definitely enjoy sort of the flexibility in my mornings because there's a 10-hour time difference. I'm able to get up and have a really leisurely morning and then get a good number of hours of work done before anybody in Alaska starts working.
Kind of a complicated question, but what sort of pushed you over the edge was President Trump getting elected. What's this political situation like in Spain? And is it better?
It does feel better, but I'm not like super ingrained in like the social and political conversations like I was with friends and coworkers and clients or whomever here. So I think there's a lot of ignorance right now, like
Which is bliss.
yeah, well, yeah, but I like Chat GPT, try to educate myself, and I've been like starting to read the local paper, and even they're sort of like slightly right of center right now, but on the right they still believe in access to abortion care, gay marriage. You know, it's like it's not these sort of hot button topics.
Well, when Aaron was on the podcast, he said that of the 3 parties that control Ireland, he's like, when I read their platforms, I really couldn't tell the difference between them because they all think climate change is real.
Yes.
They all believe LGBTQ people are people who have rights. Like the things that I was concerned about are just kind of givens. And the differences are so subtle that as somebody who's new, I can't tell.
Yeah, and that's my flat read of it when I'm like trying to understand the different parties. That the things that I was really concerned about, which are like, you know, taking these very specific topics and then politicizing them. That's not what I'm experiencing or what I'm seeing in the media in Spain. So that feels good.
Do people know that you're American? And have you like experienced any, I guess, discrimination as being an American?
We definitely stand out. I mean, people dress very nicely where we live. And not to say anything bad about Alaska, we just dress more practically. I'm usually wearing my extra tufts and a parka, a hoodie, my leggings, whatever. Athleisure is like king for me here. And I don't see anybody dressing like that in Spain. So I'm really trying to like up my game, which is why I'm at the fashion store owner trying to buy nicer clothes so I don't stick out so much. But I would say by and large, I think I've had maybe 2 interactions where people were like slightly unpleasant. People are so kind. Even when we're stumbling through the language, we're trying to like order something at a restaurant. It's a lot of laughter, honestly, which is like warms my heart because like they're trying to understand me, I'm trying to understand them, but we're both making an effort even before we try to pull out like Google Translate, right? And sometimes they'll ask where we're from. A lot of the times they don't, but there's always like kindness and grace, and that has been really beautiful because I see the way immigrants are being treated right now in our country, and what a difference.
If somebody is thinking like, this sounds like a good idea, where do they start? If they're interested in like exploring the, is it digital visa?
Digital nomad.
Digital nomad visa.
Yeah. For better or worse, I really leaned into like doing my desktop research with the help of like ChatGPT. And I took the criteria that I wanted in a new place and tried to narrow it down, and then did really research on like crime rates or statistics on certain topics that were important to me, and education. And honestly, the reason we decided against Portugal was meeting with a number of people that were older, that had kids, that were basically deciding that they were going to leave or have already left Portugal because there were not a lot of long-term economic opportunities. There's a big brain drain. Do your research. If you have short-term goals, what are those short-term goals? What about long-term goals? Do you want to be somewhere for a short period of time or a long period of time? We really wanted to find a place where our children would be rooted, where they would feel.
And your youngest is 7.
Yep, 7, 9, and 16.
So 7 to get to 18, you've got 11 years.
Yeah. So like a place that they might want to stay, a place they might want to go to college, university, and that they don't have to leave for opportunity if they don't want to. And so we did all that desktop research and really landed on Spain as a good fit for us. And then there's all the administrative paperwork side of things, like, can you move there? Because there might have been like Nordic countries that I would have loved to have considered, but maybe they have higher barriers to entry. And so Spain was like a good middle ground where they had a visa that we would be eligible for because they allow for remote work. And I was able to meet those income requirements, which are pretty modest, honestly. And
do you mind if we ask what the lowest amount of income they'll take is?
I think for one person was like around 36,000. Don't quote me on that. Like, you'd have to look it up. But it was pretty low for a single person. And then there's just you add.
Depending on how many people.
There was no requirement for like any amount of money in the bank. It was just like, do you make enough per month to support yourself and your family in Spain? And the cost of living is much less. So, that number seems pretty low compared to like cost of living in Anchorage, for example.
Well, when I hear you talk about, wanting to pick a place that if your kids fit well, that they don't have to leave, I think about your kids potentially staying in Spain forever. And I just wonder if you had any hesitation about that at all.
Not at all. No. I mean, maybe they'll come back to the US. Honestly, right now, that's like worst case scenario for me. Sounds terrible. But I mean, I was looking at universities for my son, just like preliminarily. He wants to go to school for robotics engineering. So we were looking at like the top 10 schools in the world. A lot of them were in the US. And then we hit one. It was like a table, right? And then we hit one that was in Europe. And he was like, this must be a typo. Because it was like $56,000 a year, $65,000 a year. And he was like, this one says it's like $4,000 a year. A zero must be missing. Mm-hmm. Something's wrong. And I said, no, it's because it's in Europe. And it's much, much more affordable to go to a university there. And he was like, what? And then we started talking about the student loan crisis in the US, and I'm still paying on my student loans, but I have barely been able to keep it at my original, amount that I've taken out because of the interest. And so I wanted him to like understand the impacts of making the decision and the value.
And healthcare.
Let me tell you.
Can you talk about healthcare?
Yeah. And that's a big one, right? Like the big reason that we stayed in Anchorage for so long is that we have a wonderful tribal healthcare system here and access to just a full suite of services through AMC and South Central Foundation. And there was real security in that. When I started consulting and I left sort of like a W-2 role where I could opt into insurance, for a short period of time, I was going through the marketplace to pay for private insurance and to cover our family of 5. The premiums alone were like $3,000 a month, not including like deductibles and copays and all the things. So when we moved to Spain, of course I did this research before we went. If we're taxpayer there, we have access to their public healthcare system at no cost. I mean, I'm paying higher taxes there. So
how high are your taxes?
Mine are 47%. I think it was like 36% in the US or something like that.
Okay. So 40.
It's a big jump, but It covers so much in our day-to-day costs, whether it's food or housing or phone bill or electricity or heat or
Everything's
transportation. Everything is substantially less. And so I feel like there's a real safety net in having all these social services that we have access to. And everybody has access because I'm paying higher taxes, right? And the city is so clean. And, there's all these things that I see where that money is
What
going.
about homelessness?
I haven't seen almost any in the city that we live in. It's quite a contrast from here. But we decided to opt into private healthcare. And we had heard, oh, it's expensive, So I got a quote, not having any idea where I was going to land. I was like, I'm going to pick a really good plan. It covers 100% of anybody that's in the network, 80% of anybody outside. There's no deductible or co-pays outside of that. Okay, so really get for 5 of us. It's 280 euros a month for all 5 of us.
Well, that's crazy. And I guess I had one last question. Your husband, is he still stay-at-home dadding it?
He is, yeah.
And I guess, how is he liking it?
Change is hard. We're all struggling in our own ways. He loved his house. He loved his plants and his stuff. And he had a little Miata car that he loved to drive around that was, lived in the garage. And so it's been hard to just leave everything we know. But I've seen just kind of his shoulders drop and he feels more relaxed. He's really kind of like an empath of a person. He really absorbs other people's energy. And in the tense political climate here, you can feel that from people in our community.
So he was stressed.
He was stressed. He was very, very stressed from the election until we left, and even after, right, the transition. And he's really been able to sort of relax. His cortisol has dropped. Mm-hmm. I think he just really feels that our children are safer and in a better environment for learning. And
yeah, I was going to ask about crime. The city in terms
of very, very safe. It's we've been told, if not the top, one of the safest cities in Spain. And you can feel it. You can walk around at night and you feel very safe. And yeah, there's even just I've experienced road rage in Anchorage, right? People driving crazy. And everybody's there just seems more patient and more relaxed. The pace of living is very different. Everybody's just not in a hurry. Maybe because they have social systems taking care of everybody to some degree. Everybody just seems a little more calm and relaxed and moving through life, where work isn't the number one priority. There's a siesta culture and everybody's got community, which I feel like we're on the outside of right now because we don't have that. But you see it.
So I asked Aaron, living in Ireland, if he ever thinks that he made a mistake. And they're fairly new there as well, he and his family. But he said that for him, all he has to do is start reading the news in America. And he's and I feel good about my decision. Do you feel similarly to him, or how would you characterize it?
I don't think if I were to go back, I would make a different decision, but there's a lot of heartache around feeling forced into making the decision, feeling that it wasn't particularly safe to stay here. For my children, my daughters, I would like them to have access to abortion rights in their future, not that they need it at 7 and 9, but sort of seeing the writing on the wall. And then the contentious 2-party fight, brawl almost, that it feels like we're in. It takes a high emotional toll on me. Maybe I'm just a sensitive person, but I think other people are feeling it too. I don't regret it, but I miss so much about being in my community. And I don't think that's going to go away. It can be both things. I can be happy that we made this decision. I wouldn't make a different decision, but I am still mourning the life that I left.
Last question I ask people is, do they have a book they want to recommend?
I saw that and I was honestly, I read for fun. I'm usually listening to an audiobook when I'm cleaning. And right now I'm on a rom-com kick.
Well, do you have a particular audiobook that you would recommend that you've read recently that was particularly entertaining, that's taken your mind off of the stress of the world?
I listened to Amy Poehler's new podcast.
Is it good?
Good Hang, I think is what it's called. Yes. And it just makes me laugh. Honestly, because of so much work and this move, I've been focused on all of this paperwork and processes and immigration. Sometimes I just want to turn my brain off and listening to something that makes me happy and have some joy.
Tashina Duttle, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akleg.gov or call 907-269-0123.